Good morning to everybody. And I guess I am allowed to ask or to wish you all a happy Lent. That's actually something you're allowed to wish, okay? So Lent is not a time to be sad, but it is a time to make sacrifices and offer stuff up. So I would like to talk about, during Lent, what are the 4 things that the Catholic Church proposes, really all throughout the year, but especially during Lent, special things that we can work on in order to get holy and to live a good Lent. And these are 4 different ways, if you want, like Jesus, of going into the desert. Because Jesus, you think about this, aside from the fact that Jesus was God, let's just put that aside, he was also the perfect human being. He was conceived without sin. He never once sinned in his entire life. He was the most intelligent person ever born. He was the most perfect person ever. He's not only the most perfect person ever, but he was the most perfect person possible. And even he had to go into the desert to face the devil, to fast and to pray, and to wrestle with temptation in order to take on his mission. So what does that say about the likes of you and me? Okay, so the 4 different things that the church proposes to live our Lent well, I'm going to say them real quickly. Prayer, no-brainer. If you ever want to know what the church thinks about anything, what should I be doing in order to get better? Always prayer will be the number one thing. Fasting, otherwise, or we could also refer to it as sacrifice. Almsgiving and works of charity, okay? So prayer, fasting, sacrifice, almsgiving, and works of charity. You know, if you are a priest or a religious like a nun, or just happen to pray the breviary, during Lent, I don't remember when it comes, but I'm sure it'll be soon, there's a famous reading from a guy by the name of St. Peter Chrysologus. Chrysologus, what a weird name. It means silver-tongued in Greek. And he has this cool reading, and he talks about the fact that prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, but he calls almsgiving in different parts works of mercy, so kind of all together for him, basically being generous with people one way or another. He says they're all united, and if you take away one of them, the other 2 die. So it says it's kind of like having a 3-cylindered engine, you know. You got to have all 3 of them working for the thing to work. Okay, first of all, prayer. What do you think the power of just working on one habit of prayer is? What if you were just to take and say, I'm either going to start, some prayer that I'm not praying yet and really work on it, or something maybe I'm already praying, but just trying to do it well. Really doubling down and making sure that if I'm going to pray this thing, I'm really going to pray it well. Do you think that could change your life? And it doesn't have to be a lot. Well, I'll tell you my own story. When I was in high school, I was pretty much your typical high school barbarian. Now I'm your priestly barbarian. No. I was a Catholic. I went to Mass. I wasn't doing evil things, but I was not super into my faith by any means. I was doing lots of things I should not have been doing, and probably not doing a lot of things I should have been doing. Among them, praying, outside of going to Mass. And when I was around 18, graduating from high school, God just kind of zapped me. And the way he zapped me was, I don't even remember, but the message, the Fatima message and the Medjugorje message, because that was back when Medjugorje was kind of getting going and everything, struck me, and the idea that in any given moment, even as we are speaking, somewhere somebody is dying. And that person who is dying will either go to heaven or hell. Purgatory is just a halfway house. It's not permanent, so it doesn't count. If you're going to purgatory, it means in the end you're going to heaven, so you're not in such a bad place. But that everybody who's dying will either end up in the long run in heaven or in hell, and that I can do something about it. There will be people dying right now who need my prayers in order to make it to heaven. Can you imagine? Think about that for a second. Your little acts of love, your little prayers, or your little sacrifice or whatever else, might be just enough to push somebody over the edge so that they will make it into heaven for all eternity. Wow. When I was an 18-year-old kid, all of a sudden that idea struck me and I took it seriously. Now, I was full of all kinds of baggage though. I'm not claiming that automatically I became some kind of mystic. I don't think I've hit there yet, but I believe, I started praying the rosary, and I'm not saying 5 decades. I might have probably heroically prayed like 1 decade, maybe another decade later in the day, but very quickly that 1 decade became 5 decades, became 15 decades, became fasting twice a week, became going to Mass more often, became going to confession, I discovered that such a thing as Eucharistic adoration existed, became within 2 years I'm entering a seminary. I'm entering a religious order of the Legionaries of Christ. Our seminary is up in Cheshire, Connecticut. By the way, I took a Greyhound bus from Seattle, Washington to Cheshire. Not advisable. 83 hours later. And all of that began with an 18-year-old kid who started with one prayer habit, but took it seriously. Fasting. What is the value of fasting? Remember, even Jesus needed to do it. Well, all of these things that I'm going to talk about, in the end of the day, the only reason we do them is to help us to love more. And love implies, basically love, if you want a real layman's simple definition, it means making a gift of yourself for the sake of another. That's what it means to love. When I'm willing to put myself out for another person's sake, that's when I know I love. And fasting is basically saying, or any form of sacrifice for that matter, I am willing to give up something or do something difficult or take on something challenging for the sake of another person. And I know that if I give this gift, this little sacrifice, if I put it in God's hands, I know that He can use it to touch somebody else. I may or may not ever meet that person. They could be in Africa or China, or they could be my next door neighbor. I don't know. But I know that whenever I offer up gifts of generosity, it could be something stupid. I'm thirsty right now. You know what? I'm going to wait an hour. It could be that small. That little gift has the power, when you give it to God, if it's done out of love, to change the world. And furthermore, fasting basically normally means giving up something, not giving up something that's bad. You're supposed to give up the bad things. That's not even supposed to be like part of the conversation. You just don't even go there, right? But giving up something that is good. Here's the problem with things that are good. If we're not careful, we become attached to them. And when we become attached to something, it means we become a slave. If you're not careful, you become a slave to the thing you're attached to. And it takes away your freedom to love. Let me give you an example. All of you kids. Yeah, I'm not just talking to adults. Kids, some of you are addicted to your phones, or to the games, or to the social media, or whatever. And then mom and dad come and tell you to do something. Hey, you need to clean your room or do the dishes or something. And you get mad. Because why? Because it's going to take away from your phone. That means you're addicted. And it means you are not free to love the way you should and to respond the way you should. I'm not even going to go with adults with the kind of things we get addicted to, because it's worse. Almsgiving. By the way, Father is going to come at you at the end of Mass and hit you up. There's another campaign, I don't remember what it is, but dig deep. Almsgiving means primarily giving money or goods, but really it means detachment from material things. It means being willing to share. Okay? And here's the thing. Any almsgiving is good. But if I'm almsgiving and I don't feel it, If my mentality is, you know what, I can give up this little thing and I won't even notice it. Well, that's nice. But why don't you give it up so you notice it? I'm not saying how much that should be. But if you're giving and you don't feel it, that's just overflow. Be willing to give until it hurts. And then God will bless you deeply. Big or small. Remember the story of the widow's mite. You know, it made no difference to the temple whatsoever if that old lady gave her nickel. But it made a tremendous difference to God because she gave everything she had. She didn't know what she was going to eat that day. And nonetheless, she says, Lord, it's for you. What a beautiful testimony that is. Works of charity. This is related to almsgiving. Our works of charity basically means this. Serving. Or serving, which could be like going out, doing the soup kitchen kind of thing. Or it could simply mean a smile to a person who is annoying to us. Sometimes we get theoretical about our faith, and we kneel down, and we pray our rosaries, and we want to get into that holy place, and then if somebody bothers us, we're like, rah! Okay? If you are not loving the neighbor, you are not getting holy. Don't delude yourselves. So, our love needs to extend to real flesh and blood human beings. C.S. Lewis had in one of his books, sometimes we think, I'm going to pray for the people in India who are starving, and then I can't be nice to the person who lives next door or to my mother-in-law. Mothers-in-law are some of the great means of sanctification in the church. Okay? For love to be real, it needs to engage real flesh and blood human beings. So, you guys have 40 days. Time to get cracking. The beautiful thing is this. There is a guarantee. If you put even just one or two things really into practice, but you work at it systematically, something realistic. Don't say I'm going to go on a pilgrimage to, I don't know where, to go Our Lady of Guadalupe once a week, because you're not going to do it unless you happen to live next door to a church called Our Lady of Guadalupe. But something realistic, meaningful, measurable, that will make it, that if I do this every day, even if it's small, but I do it every day, it will make a real difference. That's the kind of Lenten resolution we need to make. It'll be beautiful in 40 days' time to come back and see how it has affected your life. Remember, if I hadn't started praying a decade of the Rosary every day, I wouldn't be here. And maybe some of you would be happier. And Father and Son and Holy Spirit.